Hello everyone. In the last class we discussed about the formative approach and system approach of policy monitoring. Okay. Today we will be discussing another approach. In fact, this is related to social approach, right? So in social approach we will be discussing social system accounting, social experimentation, social auditing, research and practical synthesis. So all these approaches are the part of the societal, what you can say, societal approaches, right, or social system approaches. And lastly, we will be discussing the techniques of policy monitoring, followed by constraints in policy monitoring, and what are the measures that we can take for effective policy monitoring. Okay. So these are the things that are left for our discussion under the week 4 policy monitoring. And for today's class, we will be only discussing what is social system accounting and the indicators and social experimentations, okay, and also the techniques of policy monitoring, constraints and measures. So these last two of the social related policy monitoring we will be discussing in the next class. Okay. So this social auditing and research practice synthesis along with the comparison of all these four. So let's start with the policy monitoring approaches related to the societal systems. Okay. And first of all, let's understand these four approaches to policy monitoring. Okay. So you can follow William Dunne's book. So before understanding the social system accounting, social experimentations or social auditing and the practice synthesis and research, let's understand the basis of comparison of all these four. Okay. So if you find the social systems accounting, then we can find there are two types of comparisons that we can make. The first one is the comparisons of all these four approaches can be made based on the types of control and based on the information that is required for all these approaches. Okay. Based on this information required also we can do a comparison among these four approaches. Okay. So if you see the social system accounting, then the types of control is really in number or quantitative in nature, right, and whereas the information that is required, okay, so it is also available or sometimes the new information can also be gathered. So more or less we can say that for social systems the type of control is quantitative and information that is required is available, and sometimes the new information can also supplement the existing information. Okay. And coming to the second one, okay, the second, third and fourth impact. So the types of controls for these experimentation is not necessarily quantitative, rather they are manipulative and quantitative or qualitative in nature. So for example, for social experimentation, the types of control of the experimentation is direct manipulation and the quantitative in nature. So the characteristics is of both the types. And for social auditing and social and research and practice synthesis, the control of the experimentation is quantitative or qualitative, and for the last one is also the quantitative or the qualitative. Okay. And so far this second basis of comparison is, second type of the comparison is concerned. For the social experiment and social auditing, the information is not available, rather the new information needs to be gathered. Okay. So that is the difference that you can draw between these two and the first one. And for the last one, research and practice synthesis, so the information is available and based on which the research and practice synthesis can be undertaken for monitoring of the policy or programs. Okay. So based on this understanding, we can move to discuss about the social system accounting. So what is the social system accounting? So here we need to discuss about what are the informations that are available, right, on the social systems, and the information needs to be accounted. So that means this information needs to be accounted through capturing the variables, and those are known as the statistics. Okay. So the statistics needs to be collected on the social systems, okay, in an accounting manner. Okay. So that is the reason this is known as the social system accounting. Okay. And while collecting this data and maintaining the accounting, this particular approach enables to monitor the changes in the very subjective and objective social conditions that is occurring over a period of time. Okay. So both the changes are captured, that is any subjective social change or any objective social conditions are happening. So, all those are taken care of, the data are collected and the monitoring happens on these changes, the changes in the subjective as well as the objective social conditions over a period of time. Okay. So, as I told you that how do you then monitor the policy program? If you are taking this social system accounting as an approach to understand the policy monitoring, then the major analytic element of this social system accounting is through the social indicator. Okay, and this social indicator is also known as the statistics here, and the social indicator or statistics measures the social conditions and also if at all there is any change occurring in the social conditions over a period of time, right, that is also captured. So, the social conditions here again mean that it may be internal social conditions or external social conditions. So, what is the internal social conditions? Internal social conditions is more subjective in nature or more perceptual in nature, right, and the external social conditions are more social or more physical in nature. Okay. So, in the context of the human existence in the government or in the society. Okay. So, the one thing that we can understand here in the social system accounting, that we have to take into account for monitoring any plan or program or policy, we have to take into account the social indicators, and these social indicators can be subjective and or objective. Okay. So, both the objective and subjective conditions of the society are taken into account, which is captured through the social indicators, and that is also known as the statistics. And if you see the social system accounting for the very first time, this social system accounting was taken from a report that is published by the National Commission on Technology, Automation and Economic Progress, okay, in 64. And the target of this particular report was to examine the consequences of technological development and economic growth, and from there since 1964 till date, right. So, we are taking into account the social system accounting wherever there is a need for this particular framework. Okay. So, as I told you that in the social system accounting, the basis or the main thing that we take into account is statistics of the social indicators. Okay. So, let us say that we are monitoring a particular plan and program. Okay. We have to say that to what extent the society is healthy, right, and that is the reason multiple policy and programs are being implemented in order to monitor that multiple plans and programs. Okay. So, what are the indicators that you can take into account, or so that you can prepare a social system accounting and you can take a decision that to what extent the implementation is going on. So, you are a monitor and you are using this framework. Okay. So, since our discussion is related to these, let us say, and X1 and X2 health related policies. Okay. So, this policy X1 and policy X2. So, these, what is the area? The area is related to illness and health and illness. Okay. In order to monitor this, what are the indicators that we need to consider? That persons in state mental hospital. Okay. The number of persons in state mental hospital. So, that would be giving, so this would be an indicator under this particular area, and the monitors are using this framework of social system accounting, okay, by identifying this indicator, that is the persons in state mental hospitals. Okay. There could be multiple indicators that can be taken together in order to form indices, okay, or index, right. So, that is also a possibility. That means the base is the indicator itself, identification of indicators on that specific area where the policy is emphasizing. Okay. So, likewise you can think about multiple of the policies which are falling under all these areas, for example. Okay. And for that you have to identify what could be the best indicator to find the progress of the implementation of these area specific policies. So, for example, we can think about the income, right. So, suppose say that a particular policy is there, right, it is being implemented in a particular area, let us say in an underprivileged area, right, where marginalized sections of the societies are living. So, if you want to see that as a monitor, if you want to see that what is to what extent the Z1 policy is being implemented, right? Whether it is being implemented successfully or there are some gaps or there are some challenges that we are facing. So, the monitors are taken into account the indicator, okay. So, that is the percent of population below poverty line, okay. So, maybe during the first phase of this particular policy, right. So, what is the percentage of the population under the below poverty line, right? Let us say it is 33%, okay. During the second phase, what is the percentage of the population under below poverty line? So, maybe it is like 30%. In the third phase, it could be 21%. So, here from this, if the target of this policy is decreasing the poverty level, right, let us say from 33% to around 18%, okay, and across a period of time, and the target year is also mentioned, and these are the phase wise implementation, then we can find the progress of this particular policy through the indicators, okay. So, that is percentage of population below poverty line, okay. It is related to the income of the households, okay. So, likewise you can think about so many other areas where the policy is targeting these areas, and you need to identify what would be the best indicator for those areas, and accordingly you can find out and monitor what is to what extent the policy is being implemented, whether it is implemented successfully or there are some gaps, okay. So, the last one just I also want to highlight, let us say that a policy is there that is targeting for, let us say, science and technology, okay. So, for that, what should be the indicator? What the indicator could be the scientific discoveries during a particular period of time, okay, or you can think about the innovative approaches like how many innovations, okay, how many patents, or how many copyrights applications, okay, copyright claims are being processed. So, that could be the indicator. So, all these can be taken as indicators if you want to see that to what extent the policies that try to improve the adoption of science and technology, or just to think like that how different aspects of science and technology can be popularized by students, right, and scientific communities. So, for that the indicator could be the scientific discoveries, and under the scientific discoveries also you can find out so many other indicators, so that you can find either a particular indicator or a set of indicator to form your index, okay. So, this is how we can find that instead of capturing the status of the society in a particular area, what we are doing is that we are identifying the best indicator under that area that is being influenced by a targeted policy, okay. So, the second approach is the social experimentation, okay. So, the social experimentation is also used in monitoring the policy implementation. So, okay. So, perhaps all of us are aware about the physical experimentation, the scientific experimentation, right? The way the basic sciences and natural sciences undertake experiments in their laboratories. But here the experimentations are not necessarily within the laboratory context, rather it is in the social context, okay. So, what is this social experimentation then? The social experimentation is a process, right. It is a very scientific and systematic process that can manipulate the policy actions in a particular way, which can allow more or less precise answers to the questions that we are requiring about the sources of changes in the policy outcomes, okay. So, that means if you think about the social experimentations, okay, so we are not confining to the laboratory experimentation for physical sciences or the natural sciences, rather the laboratory experimentation of the social sciences, like you can think about the psychological laboratories, okay, the sociological experimentation that happens in a set of laboratory or set of context, or you can think about the field experimentations, the quasi experimentation. So, all these are the examples of the social experimentations, okay. And these social experimentations are advocated to find out the solutions for the problems that the society is facing, right. And these experimentations are trying to find out that how can we minimize the particular gaps right, minimizing the gaps or differences that, so we can minimize the differences between the first one is the targeted groups that we are thinking about, okay, and the second one is the experimental group that we are, that where we some kind of intervention is being adopted here, okay. So this social experimentation is adapted to in order to find some of the solutions to the societal problems, and by deliberately maximizing the difference between the types of different policy actions in a small scale or a carefully chosen groups, right, are taken into account for any policy or programs, and then we assess their consequences prior to making this particular policy for large scale investment or just to scale up that particular policy, okay. So that is the reason, so these social experimentations are conducted in a relatively smaller area or a smaller population or a smaller target. So those are known as the samples, okay. So once these experimentations are done with the samples, the findings are then made available for the entire society, okay, or sometimes through pilots and through samples. Pilots means some small chunks of the population, okay. So let us say that we are thinking about a particular problem that is being faced by, let us say 5 lakhs population, okay. So for that region we are taking into account a sample of, let us say 300 population, okay, right, on a pilot basis. Sometimes that cluster approach in the first case of 300 and again cluster approach in the second case in form of 250 households, and all these are known as the samples. Then we scale it off for the entire population, okay, or sometimes the findings are also taken into account for the entire population. So given the condition that there exists a high level of homogeneity across the samples or across the members in this particular population, okay. And here the social experimentation is based on the adaptations of the procedures that are used in the classical laboratory or classical laboratory experiment in the natural sciences or in case of physical sciences. So those experiments are just adapted, the steps and procedures that are already found in the laboratory experimentation in the physical sciences, those are adapted for this kind of experimentations in the social sciences as well, okay. So for example, some features like some procedures that are already a part of your laboratory experiments in the physical sciences are adapted in the social experimentation. The first procedure could be the direct control over experimental treatments, right, and in physical sciences we say that it is stimuli, okay. So in case of social experimentations also, while conducting a social experimentation, we use the direct control over the experimental treatment, okay. So if you are targeting a population of, let us say that 30 students, okay, so we have a direct control over this experimental treatment of size of 30 students, let us say, okay. And the second procedure that is followed in the physical sciences, which is adapted for the social experimentation, is comparison groups, okay. So many times in physical sciences we have taken into account two groups. The first one is which is hold constant, right, and right. So where there is no change, right, or no intervention is given, right, no treatment is given, and another group is there where the treatment is given, right, or intervention is given, okay. So what we do that in order to find out what is the effect of this treatment, we compare between these two groups. So here in the first group G1, okay, there is no intervention, there is no treatment, so it is hold constant, there would be no change, that is what is expected because there is no intervention, right. And if at all there would be any change, then it would be external or sometimes it is basic. So the similar kind of change can also happen to this one, okay. So that is the reason when we are finding a homogeneous society or a homogeneous, the nature of these groups are homogeneous, then we can keep one as a constant with no intervention and for the second there would be intervention, right, or this group would be provided with some kind of treatment. Okay. So, then what do we do? Then this is G1 where no intervention is given, and this is G2 where intervention is given, and we compare between the G1 and G2, and the difference between the two, right, the difference between the two is because of the treatment. Okay. So, what would be the effect of the treatment in a particular group? So, that can be captured if we draw a difference between the G2 minus G1. Okay. So, and the third procedure that also you follow in the social experiment is a random assignment. Okay. So, random assignment means that in order to avoid the bias, any kind of bias or soft corner, right. So, the samples chosen here should be random. So, that means no kind of selective bias or selection bias or no kind of soft corner should be assigned to any members or any elements, right, in the group. So, everyone would be getting what you can say opportunity to be selected, right, for this intervention. So, that is known as the random assignment. Okay. So, there would be, in order to just avoid the biasness, we do this random assignment, and this is practiced in the physical science experimentations, and we adopt this in the social experimentation as well. Okay. So, the next one, as I told you that we will be discussing the last two approaches, right, social experiments approaches in the next class, and now we will be discussing the techniques of policy monitoring. So, for policy monitoring, so what are the things, what are the basic technical aspects that needs to be taken into account? The first aspect of the technical monitoring is the monitors needs to inspect and monitor the technical performance, that means the activity chart. Okay. So, suppose say this policy is being implemented. Okay. So, during phase 1, okay, this is phase 1, phase 3, phase 2 and phase 3. So, during the phase 1, what are the activities that needs to be undertaken? So, let us say there are 6 activities needs to be undertaken in the first phase. Okay. So, as a monitor, you need to check whether all these 6 activities are performed during the first stage or not. Okay. So, that is known as monitoring the technical performance. This is the first technique of policy monitoring. And the second thing that the monitors needs to monitor is about the time. Okay. Time performance, that is known as time performance or scheduling. Okay. So, if let us say in our example of this 6 activities that needs to be undertaken in the phase 1, and if the phase 1 is again 12 months. Okay. So, the monitors needs to inspect that whether within 12 months these 6 activities are undertaken or not, or if you are saying, if the monitors are finding that these 6 activities are undertaken but not within 12 months, rather 14 months, let us say. So, that means so far the time performance of the activities are concerned, it is not appropriate. So, that means there are some limitation or lagging, and through observation and through feedback, the monitors also identified that what are the causes behind this delay. That means why 2 months extra time is taken in order to complete these 6 activities. Okay. And the last one that is also very necessary if you are doing a monitoring activities of a task or a policy, that is known as the cost performance. Okay. So, again in this example we have to take into account another aspect. For undertaking these 6 activities, right, what are the allotted amount? Okay. So, let us say for undertaking these 6 activities 2 crores rupees has already been sanctioned. Okay. So, the allotted value, the allotted resources for undertaking the 6 activities is 2 crore rupees. So, whether 2 crore rupees has already been spent for undertaking these activities within this time frame, or there are some surplus amount left, or there is some deficit. Okay. So, that in order to check that that needs to be checked by the policy monitors as well. So, that is what is known as the cost performance, which can be checked through the cash flow chart, right. So, this is a 12-month cash flow. Okay. So, in the first month, second month, or if it is like every quarter, right. So, the monitors can find out the cash flow, can check and monitor the cash flows right, for undertaking these 6 activities during this fast phase. Okay. And the last one I would say that it is an integration of everything, that if the policy monitoring needs to execute his task in a perfect way, then he has to monitor all these activities simultaneously, the technical performance activity or time performance and also the cost performance. Okay. So, we need to also discuss that from our examples we can find that there could be gaps. Okay. So, the gaps in the target and the gaps in actual achievement is because of some constraint. Okay. So, what could be the constraint in the policy monitoring? Okay. So, sometimes we are finding that there are very poor design, right, implementing the policy system. So, that can be the constraint in policy monitoring as well, that your designing is really poor, right, and that is the reason your monitoring would be poor or monitoring would not be adequate enough in order to find out the progress of the implementation. And sometimes the policy monitoring faces the time constraint, or sometimes the policy monitors are not acquainted with enough number of corrective actions, or they could only be exposed with, or they have only access to a limited corrective activities and actions. So, that could also be a constraint in the policy monitoring. And the other factors in or the constraints in the policy monitoring is ignorance in the policy monitoring team or policy monitoring officials. So, many times very young persons are also given. Young means they could also lack experience. So, those who are just fresh and they lack adequate experience, sometimes because of some pressures, that is internal pressures, those officials are also sent for the monitoring activities. So, that may also lead to a constraint in policy monitoring. Okay. So, if these are some of the constraints that we may encounter in policy monitoring, then we also need to understand how the policy monitoring can be effective. What are the measures that we can take so that the effective policy monitoring can happen. Okay. So, the first measure for effective policy monitoring is addressing the constraint. Okay. So, what is the first constraint that we discuss? Poor design. Okay. So, now we need to strengthen it. So, designing the monitoring system, right. So, for monitoring system also the team must be designing their activities or plan of actions. So, the first one is the technical performance. The completion of policy activities should be planned, right, to check the technical performance. Second, that whether the implementation process is progressing on time as per the schedule, that is schedule performance. The third one that needs to be checked is the sanctioned budget. So, whether the activities and time is also matched with the cost aspects. Okay. So, designing the monitoring system is the first priority in the effective policy monitoring. The second one is the communication systems, strengthening the communication systems, like to identify that what is the status of policy progression. Okay. So, for this status of policy progression, the monitors needs to be well informed that what is the target of the policy implementation during that particular time. Okay. And then only it can check or monitor that what is the actual achievement. Okay. Then only it can find if there is a gap or both are converging. So, leading to effective policy implementation. Okay. So, for effective communication, we need to strengthen the communication system, right, that what is the targeted output to be achieved and what is the actual achievement. Okay. That needs to be communicated very clearly to the monitors, or monitors should have enough information about these aspects as well, that is policy progression. And if at all there is any gap or deviations, right, so then they should be able to identify these gaps with the corrective actions. Okay. So, deviations from the planned progress they should be able to identify, they should be efficient enough to identify these gaps, and if they could identify and if they are finding that there are gaps, then adequate number of corrective actions and plans must be developed by them, right, beforehand for the completion of the monitoring activities and completion of the implementation process as well. Okay. So, the other aspect that we need to also think about for effective monitoring is the monitoring progress, right. For example, enhancing the administrative capacities for monitoring or taking corrective actions like corrections are needed, or if there is some kind of improvement is needed, then they should be able to, if the corrections are in terms of replanning, then the monitors should able to take these decisions, right, how to again design for replanning. And sometimes they must be able to take the decisions of cancellation, that means they need to be given or empowered that they have the authority to cancel the implementation process altogether if the statistics they have collected is not found to be suitable and satisfied. Okay. So, you can refer to this book chapter 6, right, and thank you very much. In the next class we will be discussing the last two approaches. Okay.